I'm Dr. Bailey. I'm one of the new cardiologists here at Knox Community Hospital. A little bit about myself. I was born in Athens, Ohio. I was born at the same hospital I graduated medical school from. And after that, I went to Dallas, Texas for several years for doing internal medicine and cardiology. And then I finished up at University of Miami in Florida for interventional and structural cardiology, learning how to do the procedures, stent placements, and valve replacements. And we wanted to come back to Ohio with our kids, two young boys. And this town, when I interviewed here, reminded me so much of Athens. I really, really loved this town. It had kind of the same feel, small community, universities, and I really liked the environment. So that's how I ended up here. But today, we're going to be talking about something that impacts almost every family, and that's heart health. So I'll walk you through, what heart disease is, how we diagnose and treat it, and more importantly, what you can do to prevent an event. The heart is a muscular pump about the size of our fist, and it beats approximately 100,000 times a day. And what it does is it's responsible for pumping oxygenated blood from your heart to all the arteries throughout your body, and that's what gives your cells oxygen and nutrients. So it's a very important organ. Obviously it's an organ that's dear to me, and I think it's the most important organ in the body. What is heart disease? So heart disease is an umbrella term, and the most common of which is coronary artery disease. And what that is coronary artery disease is blockages in the arteries that supply blood to your heart. So that's the most common form of heart disease, but we also see patients with other forms of heart disease, such as heart failure, where your heart may not be strong enough to pump blood, or it may not relax appropriately. We also see patients with valve disease, where the valves in your heart don't open or don't close appropriately. And we see patients with heart rhythm disorders, where your heart might not beat regularly, it might beat way too fast or too slow. And there are things we can help you with to diagnose and treat these disorders. So why does it matter? Why are you here today? Well, heart disease is the #1 cause of death in the U.S. And it's the #1 cause of death in Ohio, and it's the #1 cause of death in Knox County. And a lot of the precursors to heart disease go unnoticed for long periods of time, and they may be silent, and you may not recognize these until it's too late and there's irreversible damage done. So often the best way to manage this is to prevent the problem from happening. And to do that, a lot of times you need to have regular checkups or get diagnosed with conditions that you may not know you have. So what are the risk factors for heart disease? Well, some of the risk factors are not preventable. Some things like what our parents gave us, our family history, or our age, we can't do too much about. But as you can see, a lot of the risk factors, in fact, the majority of the risk factors are something we can do something about. And we can prevent heart disease by managing these disorders. When you're sitting at home and you're having symptoms, there are certain things that cardiologists will feel comfortable when you tell us, and there are certain things that makes us raise our eyebrows and get nervous, and we think additional testing needs to be done. Things like chest pain or pressure, significant shortness of breath, or dizziness, or palpitations, which means it feels like your heart's skipping a beat, especially when these are combined, or these are new symptoms that you haven't had before. This is the time to get it checked out. These are symptoms you do not want to go unchecked and unnoticed. So you've heard people have heart attacks, and you've had friends that have had heart attacks, and you may not know what that is, but what happens is, with all the fun we have in life, we develop plaques in our arteries. And they've actually done autopsies on infants, and they already have plaques in their coronary arteries. So these plaques develop very, very early. And what happens is these plaques can build up over time, and that causes a narrowing of the vessels. So like if you had a tube, that tube can get closed. If that happens slowly, typically what happens is you might have symptoms that aren't noticeable because you're living with yourself. So, you may feel sluggish, weak, but you've been living with yourself every day. So you may not notice these symptoms. But what a heart attack is when those plaques rupture or erode, what happens is a clot forms. It's part of the body's natural process, and that clot can close that tube. It can close the vessel. And when that happens, blood does not get past that blockage, and that tissue will die. So that is a very important time to get checked out because every minute matters. That's when they call me in the middle of the night and I come in and we have to open up that vessel emergently. And we're not doing that for fun. We're doing that because that tissue will die and we can't bring it back. So every minute matters in that situation. So it's very important to get help fast. So these are some of the symptoms that you may have when you're having a heart attack. The most common ones are going to be chest pressure. Patients feel left-sided chest pressure. It may radiate down the arm. It may radiate up the jaw. Some patients say it feels like an elephant is sitting on their chest. Those are the classic common ones. But not everyone reads the textbook and not everyone is your classic patient. In fact, older patients and females are much more likely to have atypical symptoms, okay? Some of those atypical symptoms can just be like sweating. You might be sitting down, not exercising, and you're feeling, we call it diaphoresis, like you break out in a cold sweat. You could feel nauseous. Some patients feel belly pain as their first sign. So those are more atypical symptoms, and females, diabetics, and older patients are more likely to have atypical symptoms. So these are things that you need to pay attention for, and if you're concerned if these symptoms are new, then you need to seek help. So how do we diagnose these problems? Well, we have lots of tools, thankfully now, that helps us risk stratify patients and diagnose problems before it gets too late. So one thing we can do is we can do an electrocardiogram. Now that's a test, a very simple test that we can use to check your heart rhythm. We can look for subtle signs of a heart attack on these electrocardiograms. We can do stress testing, which is a non-invasive way of looking at the arteries and seeing how the heart is functioning and if there are any blockages. We can do echocardiograms, which is an ultrasound of the heart. It's just like when you had a baby and they did the ultrasound of the baby on your belly. We do the same thing of the heart with ultrasound, and we can look at how the heart is pumping, if it's relaxing normally, if it's contracting normally. We can look at the valves, and we can look to make sure there's no fluid around the heart. Other tests we do are heart catheterizations, where we take a small tube and we can go through your wrist or your leg into the vessel, and we inject dye directly into the coronary arteries, and we could diagnose and potentially treat blockages. And now in Mount Vernon at Knox, we're getting CT angiography, and we can do, essentially, we can inject dye and look to see if you have any blockages without taking you to the cath lab. So that's something that we'll be bringing to you soon. So what do I do? So I am an interventional and structural cardiologist. So essentially all that means is I do procedures on the heart. And what kind of procedures I do are minimally invasive procedures. So if you have a heart attack and I'm on call, they'll call me and I'll come in the middle of the night and we will use a catheter and we'll go through your wrist or your leg and we'll go all the way up to where the arteries come off and supply oxygenated blood to the heart, and we'll inject dye. And we can see which artery is blocked, and then we can fix that blockage with a balloon and a stent. I also do valve replacements. So that's if you have a valve that's irreparable, we can replace that valve now, and we can do that without open heart surgery. We can do it minimally invasive through catheters through the leg. So these are things that we can help you with, and we can not only treat, but we can help prevent those problems from happening. So how can you prevent? Well, a lot of the work, unfortunately, is on you. But the good thing is there are lots of things we can do to prevent. And we know now that heart disease, in most of the time, is preventable. So the main things you can do are move. Every day, you really should be doing something to increase your heart rate, get yourself sweating. You don't have to go to the gym. A gym membership is great, but you need to move as much as you can. So it doesn't matter if that's taking stairs every day. It doesn't matter if that's parking far away from the store and walking more, or going on walks with your friends, walking your dog. The goal is to move regularly and get your heart rate up every day. Also, the environment out here in terms of nutrition is not ideal, and that's in the US in general. So that's a constant battle that we all have. It's me too. I mean, you're hungry, you're in a hurry, you get what's quick and easy, and typically that's food that's not good for you. But the recommendations for heart health are going to be eating essentially on the outside of the grocery store and not the inside. Non-processed foods, more vegetables, more colors, more fresh foods are better. Less processed foods. If you're smoking, it's easier said than done, but quitting smoking is generally the best thing you can do for your heart. That's something that we know is not easy for people who smoke, and something that often takes many, many attempts, but we're here to help you with that. If you're still smoking, we'll help work with you to lessen it or eventually quit. We have resources that we can help you with. And then managing your blood pressure and blood sugar. These are often things that are silent. You don't know your blood sugar is high, and you don't know your blood pressure is high. So these are things that we have to check and stay on top of. And the goal is to get you on a medicine, if it's high, to elevate it, and then eventually with lifestyle changes to take you off the medicine. So going through step by step, everyone has heard of the Mediterranean diet. You don't have to do the Mediterranean diet, but the reason the Mediterranean diet is so good is because these foods have been shown to promote heart health and to reduce plaque burden in the arteries and to reduce the formation of plaque. So essentially, you don't have to do the Mediterranean diet, but you want to eat healthy fats, lean meats, less red meat, less fried foods, more fish and more lean meats like turkey, chicken, grilled, not fried. You want to eat vegetables, just think color. The more variety, the better. And in general, lower in red meat and lower in sugar. Sugar, I think red meat and meat in general kind of got a bad rap over the years, but more data is coming out on how much inflammation sugar creates, and I think we really need to focus on that. So cholesterol, you always hear about cholesterol. Well, cholesterol is necessary. We need cholesterol. It's not all bad. But in general, if you have a heart problem or you have very high cholesterol, the one we don't want is LDL. That tends to promote the formation of plaque in the vessel. And HDL, we think of that as the good cholesterol, and what that does is it tends to reduce the formation of plaques in the vessel. So, things like eating lots of salmon, eating lots of Mediterranean type diet, and moving a lot tends to increase your HDL. A lot of that is genetic too. And avoiding those foods can lower your LDL. Now, there are medications for these things too. I think the best way is always to try things without medications first. But if you've had an event, like you've had a heart attack or a stroke, you may need to be on one of these medications like a statin for a short period of time or for a long period of time. And those can help with this cholesterol too. Now, blood pressure is something that we all are familiar with, but it's often known as the silent killer. And the reason is because this is something that causes damages over a long period of time, and it often goes unnoticed. So you can be sitting at your home with a very elevated blood pressure, and you might have no symptoms. The problem is that creates a lot of stress on the heart, and that can promote these plaques. And so while it may not be affecting you tonight or tomorrow, it may affect you irreversibly in 20 years. If your blood pressure is very high, it's essentially like trying to open a door and someone's holding it closed. It puts lots of stress on your heart because your heart is beating against that high pressure. So that's something that if you check regularly, you'll become very familiar with your blood pressure. You're going to become very familiar with what makes it go up and what keeps it down. And we don't always need to treat these with medicines, but I think by checking it regularly, you're going to be very familiar with your blood pressure, and we'll have a lot better of an idea of how to treat it when you come to our office. So exercise, I think that, exercise probably doesn't get enough. Everyone says it, and they kind of just say it in passing, and then we prescribe you a medicine. But I think the most important thing to do is to move a lot. We kind of live in an environment where we're forced to get in a car and go from point A to point B, park the car, go into the store, and then go back into the car and drive. And I don't think we're moving as much as we need to be. So I think it's extremely important to move every day. And that will alone, without medicines, lower your heart rate, lower your blood pressure, lower your cholesterol, lower your body mass index. So these are things that we can all do regularly, but it takes time and it takes habit. And these are things that are very hard to form habits, but that's what we have to do. And you don't have to go from one day to the next and exercise like a madman, but what you should do is make little changes gradually, and it becomes easier over time. Smoking, the problem with smoking is that it does damage to the lining of the vessels. And that damage can form plaques. And we saw what plaques can do when they rupture. They can cause heart attacks. So when you quit smoking, we actually see changes in the blood vessels within 72 hours. So, and then after so many years, the earlier you quit, the damage may be reversed. So you may not see any of the negative impact of smoking if you quit early enough. And I think another thing that we don't emphasize enough is sleep. And it's kind of hard for me to say I'm an interventional cardiologist. I wake up all the time. I never sleep well, but it's extremely important. Stress and sleep can have a big impact on our heart health. And our mind and our heart are not independent. They're connected. So the recommendation used to be 6 to 8 hours. Now it's 7 to 9 hours. So the closer to 9 hours you can get, the better. It's good news for people who love sleep. But I think one of the main things is you need to really focus on keeping your stress levels low. We all are going to have stress. You can manage those with exercise, with talking with family members. Some people do meditation. I think that you need to have something as a coping mechanism for your stress. And that's been shown to reduce cardiac events. Now, females, are complicated, and their heart is also complicated. So, it's well known in the literature that females do not have like your typical symptoms. So as cardiologists, we have to be on very high alert because we're typically seeing patients that come in and they say, my chest hurts, feels like an elephant sitting on it. That's easy for us. We say, okay, great, I know what's going on. Females often have atypical symptoms, and they'll have stomach pain, for example, or they'll have nausea, and they may not feel the typical symptoms. So you need to be on high alert for that. And I think the best way to approach this is to schedule regular doctor's appointments so we can catch things early. If you have high cholesterol, high blood pressure, we can catch that early, and we can risk stratify you and do tests to prevent a heart attack. So, when should you see a cardiologist? Well, the most obvious times, if you can name lots of family members who have had a heart attack, especially at an early age, you're going to be at higher risk. We know patients whose mom, dad, or siblings had heart attacks at an early age are at much higher risk. If you have been told you have a lot of calcium on your arteries, if you had a CT scan that showed that increases your risk. It doesn't mean you're going to have a heart attack, but it increases your risk, and we can do things to prevent the event. If you have symptoms like the chest pressure, shortness of breath, palpitations, these are things that we think you should get help with because we can diagnose a problem before it presents itself. And then if you've ever had a prior heart event like a heart attack or a stroke or an arrhythmia, this is a time to see a cardiologist so we can help prevent a future event. So what happens during the procedure? I mean, from your guys' perspective, we take you on a table, we come in, we look like astronauts, and I know it's very scary, and then we give you drugs so you forget everything. But what we're doing is essentially, we're going through the wrist nowadays over 90% of the time. It used to be we'd go through the leg, but the studies show it's safer for you if we go through the wrist. It makes it harder for us, but we take a little tiny tube, smaller than your pinky, and we'll go up the artery all the way into where the arteries that supply oxygen and nutrients to the heart come off, and we engage those with a small tube, and we inject dye. Now, when we inject that dye, we can see if there's plaque formation, if there's a severe blockage. If there is, we can do additional testing to see how severe that is. And we can use an ultrasound in the vessel to see what that blockage is made of. Is it made of calcium? Is it made of fat? Is it made of just plaques? And then that gives us a strategy on how to treat that blockage. Typically, patients can go home that very same day, and the recovery is quick. Within 1 week, you'll be doing your activities of daily living, your normal activities. So the procedure has, from open heart surgery to this, it has advanced tremendously. Now at Knox, we have a very robust cardiac care team. We are delivering very high level of care here. I've trained at big university programs. I trained with very famous people, and we're given a good cardiac team here. And what we're doing is we're doing everything from office visits to complex interventions. We can do stress testing. We have a robust imaging service, and we can do cardiac rehab. So we'll take care of you before, during the event, and afterwards. And almost everything to do with your heart we can do right here in Mount Vernon. So in general, from this talk, what I think you should do is I think you should be aware of the risk factors and which ones are modifiable. Many of them are modifiable, what you can do to prevent heart disease. In general, you need to eat a healthy diet and move as much as you can. I think you should monitor your blood pressure, blood sugar, and your cholesterol levels. And if you have symptoms, don't ignore them. It doesn't mean that if you go to the doctor, we're going to order a bunch of procedures, but we will be able to risk stratify you and guide you. So thank you all so much for joining me. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.